year.
Welcome back to our 912 Sports Facebook Live show. Kevin Price, podcast host, and staff writer for 912 Sports, joined now by John Nelson with GPB Sports. John, how you doing this evening?
Oh, it's a long day that was interesting to say the very least, Kevin. I mean, we all know that there are the four seasons that are here in the state of Georgia. It is not summer, fall, winter, and spring. It is football, spring football, Cruton, and National Signing Day. And so we are in seasons 1 and 2 at the same time.
Well, for sure. And of course, everybody who follows football really nationwide, but certainly in the state of Georgia, was in tune to what was happening with the Valdosta football program today and their appeals hearing in front of the Georgia High School Association. And that's certainly why we have John here with us. He's been all over that today. And John, just in case somebody is not in tune with what is happening, let's back up and let them kind of know the news peg. Recently, Valdosta was put on notice by the GHSA that they had been fined $7,500 for illegal recruiting and lack of institutional control. Several players were suspended, found ineligible by the GHSA. They were also going to have to forfeit possibly all of their ball games from last year that they won. And then those players that were found to be illegally recruited, according to the GHSA, were going to be ineligible at GHSA schools going forward for the next school year. Of course, one of those was Jake Garcia, who would be a senior moving on to play quarterback at the University of Miami. So he actually would not be impacted by that ruling. And then, of course, also, I guess probably the biggest thing that is a sticking point with a lot of folks is that the GHSA was also planning to ban Valdosta from the upcoming postseason in the 2021 season. So Valdosta appealed that this morning. That appeal was denied, and now Valdosta is set to take that appeal to the next level. There was some miscommunication or some misreporting, I guess, that second appeal was supposed to happen today. That is not necessarily the case, and we'll talk to you about that in a moment. But John, first of all, the appeal was denied. Is that really, in a nutshell, what you expected to come out of today's process?
I'd anticipated that, because if the Georgia High School Association is going to fine a school $7,500, $1,000 per student in question, plus $2,500 for lack of institutional control, if they're going to sit there and ask that Valdosta forfeit their wins from the 2020 season, and they're going to say that they're not going to be in the postseason for 2021, then you would anticipate that the appeal would go the way that we anticipated that it would, where not much would change. And so now the next step is to figure out the state executive committee, and that it goes from there to the full committee. And so we haven't heard yet as to what the next step is. Is there a week where you have to fill in paperwork if you're the city of Valdosta when it comes to what you're looking to do when it comes to an appeals process? The next step is to go from the state executive committee to either the board of trustees, which is 13 members, or the full state executive committee, which is 75 members. And I know that you can't just bring everybody together that quickly and try to have something where it was a 3-hour discussion, I think, on Monday morning, and you can't quite turn it around that quickly to have the next stage. And I think that's why you have X number of days to sit there and submit your appeal and have it go to the next stage. And that's where we are right now. But no, honestly, Kevin, I did not anticipate that things would go in any different direction, but I still think we are far from being done.
Now, let me ask you this, John. According to what was reported today, and it seemed to be pretty accurate, and you let me know if you've heard anything different. But first of all, Rush Probst, Coach Probst, is on administrative leave at Valdosta. He was advised by legal counsel not to attend today's hearing, but several Valdosta officials were there, including the superintendent of schools, city schools, which Valdosta is, their principal, some assistant principals, I believe, their athletic director, the parents of some of the student athletes that were ruled ineligible. And then, like I said, the AD was there. their officials at the school said everything, testified that everything was above board. Their parents said, the student athletes said that they did not receive any compensation or anything from Coach Prost or the Touchdown Club or anybody at the school to transfer in to play for Valdosta. So everything, according to Valdosta's side, was done, on the up and up. Of course, the 4-person panel that was representing the GHSA did not buy that. They stuck to their guns, so to speak, and went with the ruling by the GHSA. So at the next step, John, what can Valdosta really do to get the GHSA to change course? I mean, what kind of argument can they present that would force the GHSA, a larger number of people, to change their mind? Can they really only hope that a larger, audience, so to speak, would maybe favor them? Is that really the only recourse that they have?
I don't. To be honest, I would like to know what their rebuttal is. And going from the original panel to a larger panel of 13 or 75, I would like to know what else. If this appeal, with the evidence that was presented and the testimony that was presented, did not work, then you're going to the next step. Are you going to present this testimony over again with the same individuals and the same evidence that you brought in on Monday? And I think that's the $25,000 question. And you wonder really what they're going to do as a city school system. And it's an interesting, obviously you have to let the situation go to its logical conclusion, whether it's to the 13-member board of trustees, the full state board of 75. I still think that once, if the city of Valdosta gets, and these individuals get a ruling that goes against them from the next stage in this, I still think that they're going to think of other recourses to go beyond that. So when I mention in all of the Monday discussions that I've had, what do you think is going to happen? I still think that there's a lot that the city of Valdosta as an entity is thinking about doing, and you follow it to its logical conclusion, whatever you think that is. And so I think that, as we've been talking about this, a lot of folks sit there and say, well, okay, this next stage is the last one. I don't know. And that's the thing. It's like you sit there and you want to go down every possible avenue you can if you're the city of Valdosta when you're trying to come up with any kind of resolution, and you're going to fight for what you believe in. And so I know that, Superintendent Kaysen, Dr. Richardson, the principal, and everyone who was present in Thomaston on Monday is going to sit there and say, okay, well, we're not done yet. We're going to continue to do what we think that we need to do. But I would like to know, and they have zero recourse to tell me or anybody else what their additional evidence is, or if they're going to restate their case. But I would like to know what's inside the folder when they get to that next level.
And, I don't really know how this works, and I don't know if it's kind of all or nothing, but, I don't know if they'll do this the next time now that they've already kind of had this appeal denied. But I didn't know if Valdosta might say, okay, look, we'll take the fine. That's fine. You've got us. We'll accept the fact that these players are ineligible. If they want to move on to, another school, because it's only GHSA schools that they can't, participate at next year, which means they could go to a private school, a GISA school, or they could move to another state if they wanted to play public or private in another state. I thought maybe they might play the sympathy card and say, look, the postseason ban is too harsh. Could you consider lifting that and, give X, Y, and Z, Y, maybe the kids that would still be in the program, certainly had nothing to do with any wrongs that, maybe that Valdosta admitted, took place, if they were willing to admit that. I don't know if they can go back now and say, hey, you got us, we are wrong, and do that, or if they would stick to their guns and say, we did do nothing wrong, and we're here to tell you that again. So I thought that might be what would happen, or if now they might switch gears and admit guilt. Do you really think Valdosta feels like they're innocent here?
I wouldn't think that you, and this is a double negative, and I'm going to apologize for my mother, the English major, when I do it. I wouldn't think that you wouldn't defend yourself if you thought that everything was above board. I mean, you mentioned in the hearing that the city of Valdosta, through all of their testimony, said that everything was done above board, there were no violations, etc. Then carrying your thought to its logical point, if you went one direction, why would you admit the inverse in trying to get a better result? Because what you would in effect be doing as you present your case, counselor, here's how I'm interpreting it. If everyone from Valdosta who was there in Thomaston says everything was above board, we didn't do anything wrong, here's the evidence that supports our theory, then to me, it doesn't make any sense to try to prove it from a negative. You understand where I'm coming from
Right.
here, where if you're taking it from the inverse and you say we did everything above board, there's no logic to sit there for me to sit there and say, okay, let's say the opposite and see if it comes up with a better result, because then shouldn't you have done the opposite of what you would do on the second stage in the first stage anyway, knowing what the result was going to be? And so, no, I think that Valdosta is going to continue to adhere to what they did when they came into the discussion in the first place. They're going to sit there and continue to make the point everything was above board. There were no violations here. Everything was done squarely from a GHSA perspective. So there was no violation from our end. I think that there's probably either other affidavits or other personnel or testimonies or pieces of paper that they would add to support their case to perhaps add to what was presented against the original executive committee, the smaller version of the executive committee. And so when it goes to the next steps, I just think that the city of Valdosta is probably just going to try to add more positives to their case when they present it either to the board of trustees or the full executive committee.
I got you. And of course, John, as we await this next step, I mean, it's very intriguing. Spring practice is upon us. The summer's going to be here, and you got, Valdosta carrying on and not knowing whether Coach Russ Probst is going to be the coach next year or not. I mean, obviously, Valdosta has put him on administrative leave, but we're obviously talking on hypotheticals here, and I kind of hesitate to do that. But if the appeal is denied again and Valdosta really feels like, Coach Probst and their football program did nothing wrong, I mean, if they really feel that way, is Coach Probst still going to be their coach, you think? Or if this due process carries out and this appeal is upheld, do you feel like they have no choice but to let Coach Probst go?
That's, once again, that's another question to the fore. And I think that probably the best folks to answer that are Dr. Kaysen, Mr. Mitchell, and Dr. Richardson. And, when you're looking at someone who's currently on administrative leave, pending an investigation or a continuance of an investigation to get to its conclusion, this end result with the GHSA probably plays a part in it, but to what extent, we don't know. But really, I think the only folks that can answer the question about who can be the head coach at Valdosta for 2021 are those three. It is the superintendent, the principal, and the athletics director. And they would have to look at all of the evidence that's been presented in this first stage in Monday in Thomaston, the second stage as a part of the appeals process, or as they continue to pursue other avenues to come up with what they would think as a logical ending and a result in their chase to try to sit there and continue to prove their case as they stated in Thomaston. So I think that really it's going to come down to those three individuals as to determine who is head coach, when that person is head coach, and what 2021 looks like, considering, as you mentioned, that the spring practice starts, I want to say, either later this week or at the beginning of next week. So, it's an important time for the coaching staff, in whatever form it is, to get reps with the students and to get reps to get prepared for the spring game and all these other things that we always like to talk about, that stuff on the field as opposed to all the stuff off the field, Kevin.
And, I hate to speculate about who they would get because, they have a coach and he's just on administrative leave. But, who would they get? Who would want to inherit a situation like this at the last minute? wow, it would be it would be interesting. Let's just say that if they had to make a coaching move at this point, I guess you would agree with that. We could just move on.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, it is a question that, some schools around the United States that they will have to tackle. And this is just the universality of it all. And the question is, when you have something that happens in the spring, it does create issues going forward, because if you're having a coaching change in the spring, and then you're not able to do much until you get back for practice in June and July, then it creates that gap in the learning curve. And so it's once again, it's those three individuals that they have that to add to all of the current evidence in the case counselor that they're going to have to weigh going forward.
And, regardless of what happens with the coaching situation, if this appeal is upheld, I think it's pretty safe to assume that these players that are ineligible at a GHSA school, and certainly that includes Valdosta, very well, if they want to play, they were willing to move to play for Coach Probst at Valdosta. I see most likely they're going to be willing to move possibly to somewhere close nearby. We all know a school that they could probably move to easily, or maybe even out of state somewhere to play. I guess it just depends on whether they're willing to move again. But I can see one fallout being that these players move on and make sure they get to play next year. Do you see that as a very likely possibility?
Well, I think that they'll pursue it if they would end up being ineligible. But the question is, when it comes to being ineligible under GHSA purview, then that means that you would have to go out of state under the operating idea that whatever state you would go into wouldn't know what happened in the state of Georgia. I mean, state associations and the top level administrators, they all talk. So, first and foremost, you're going to have all of these folks from all these neighboring states or whatever states, you're going to know what happened. So it won't be a secret if a player decides that they want to try to go someplace else. And if a player decides that they want to stick in the state of Georgia, once again, if you do that and you express the desire to go to another program in another institutional run, an institutional gathering, institutional organization, would that particular school, knowing what's been going on over the last handful of months, would the school that might be courting any one of those student athletes want that grief, want that kind of attention, want that kind of possible negative attention in bringing in a student athlete? And so I think it's something that any school that would be interested in a student athlete in any situation like this, where they've been rendered ineligible for whatever reason, it's something where a school by school basis, these schools have to look at themselves and go, do we want to go down that road? And I think that it's just something that any school in any situation like this, where you're dealing with ineligible students and student athletes, do you want to go down this road? And I think it's a question that they're going to have to ask themselves, Kevin.
And John, a year ago when Valdosta made this decision to hire Rush Probst, I knew it was going to be interesting, and I just didn't know in what way it was going to be interesting. And boy, did it get interesting in a hurry right out of the gate with Jay Garcia. Yeah. And of course, they make a run and lose big to Buford. But here we are with some drama, I guess you could call it. It has been interesting in year one under Rush Probst, certainly, hasn't it?
That's definitely a word to use. Interesting, yes. It has been interesting to cover Valdosta football because of what Rush Probst is as a high school football coach, and it is indisputable that he is a tremendous high school football coach. And the idea of him going from Moultrie, 45 minutes to the southeast, and going to a story program like a Valdosta, where a lot of folks are seeing Rush and Valdosta, and you have a legendary coach and a legendary program, what's going to happen? And so it's instant viewing. It really is. And, with everything that's happened in the off season and everything that happened during the season to get us where we are now, it has turned into must-see viewing for whatever reason. And I know that that folks in South Georgia would sit there and say immediately that, you knew what you were getting yourselves into. And then there are others who would sit there and they still want to give Rush Probst a chance to continue to be that football coach that was brought into Valdosta in the first place. And I think that really it's disappointing and it's sad on some levels where you have folks who, you know, are having to deal with this on a daily basis. And because you and I and Sean and everybody there at 912 and everybody at GPB, we love high school football. We know what it means to these towns. We know what it means to these states. We know what it means to the programs and what wins and losses mean. And to be talking about legalities and appeals and committees and boards and all of this stuff, knowing what the sport means to the state of Georgia, it's sad on a lot of different levels. And, you know, you wonder if it's a learning lesson for any program that would want to think about going down this road in the future. And so, you know, is it a teachable moment? Is it a moment where we learn? Or is it just another moment in the progress and what we see on a daily basis when it comes to athletics? I mean, we see it at other levels, and now it has permeated the high school ranks, and now we just see where it goes from here.
And John, I guess I do have one more question for you, and then we'll let you go. I know you have some other fish to fry. A lot more. Your day's still kind of just getting started, I guess. And here we are in the evening hours. But you know, Coach Hines, I call him Coach Hines, but Dr. Hines has done a well of a job. I mean, he's navigated the COVID era, you know, great. I mean, here we are in the spring, and we're going to look like we're going to get through spring sports championships, and he's to be commended for the job he's done. And it started back in the fall with getting everything going, but he seems to be ruling with more of an iron fist than other leadership did in the past. And this kind of ties in with this Valdosta ruling. I mean, there's been some other football similar situations where maybe the GHSA was a little more hands off and maybe let some things slide that, you know, maybe this leadership team would not have maybe let go. Do you see Dr. Hines maybe kind of trying to tighten the reins with some of the issues that are out there, like transferring and different things? You know, obviously when Jake Garcia did what he did to start the year, I mean, they came out with a new rule as far as, you know, the way transfers are you know, going to be dealt with in the future. So they're kind of trying to nip things in the bud the best they can. So it seems like he's a little more hands-on with certain things. Do you kind of see it that way?
Yeah, and also when you have an event or a series of events or moments or a situation, I guess is the larger term, like we're having at Valdosta right now, it's not something that really can be ignored. It can't be swept under a rug. It can't just be sitting there and it's like, oh yeah, well, you know, it's done, it's over there, and the season's over and what have you. I think that what you have to do is set an example for not just your state, but you have to set an example for the sport, and you have to set an example for all of the governing bodies. And you can't just let something like this go, and you have to put your foot down. And what we're seeing from the GHSA is them putting their foot down in this, and they're being steadfast in their rulings and their judgments. They're being very firm with what they're saying and what they're seeing. They're looking at a lot of the evidence and making sure that folks are seeing what they're seeing at the same time, laying out their case through public documents in the near term. So I think that you can't just let something like this go. And what we're seeing from the GHSA is they're not letting it go.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, John, well, we'll let you go. We could talk to you, you know, all night, but we know you got other things to do with football kind of knocking on our door. We'll certainly be hopefully talking to you more as we go through the spring and the summer, and hopefully we'll have a COVID-free football season this fall. You guys did a great job this past year with GPB, and we look forward to even greater things from you guys going forward.
Looking for great things from you guys down there at 912 as well. It's great to catch up with you. And
all right, thank you, John. We appreciate it. That was John Nelson with GPB Sports. We appreciate everything he does with them, and also appreciate what he gave us tonight with his insight on the Valdosta situation. We'll be back more with our Facebook Live show here on 912 Sports.